Good evening, Canby, and welcome to another riveting evening of Planning Commission work here on August 8th, 2022. It probably isn't showing up on the cameras, but I'm so excited that I'm practically vibrating. With that, we will go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent. So with that, now we move on to our second item, which is our consent agenda. It says Planning Commission minutes, dates to be determined. Do we have the determined dates?
No.
So do we have something under consent agenda? No. Okay, so we have no consent agenda items. Thank you. Now we'll go ahead and move on to citizen input on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on non-agenda items. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. Staff and the Planning Commission will make every effort to respond to questions raised during citizens input before the meeting ends or as quickly as possible thereafter. Does anybody out there in our PAC stands tonight have any questions or statements for public comment? Clearly none, because there's only 2 people here. Well, actually, did you want to speak? I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Carol Palmer.
Not you, Carol, I know you, but you're just coming in?
Yes, my name is Lana Bollinger. I live here in Canby, and I just come mostly to observe, but I might say something at the end of the meeting. I don't know.
Okay, we only, here at Planning Commission, we only have one opportunity for citizens input. It's in the beginning of the meeting. So I would say that if you do want to chat with us, I would recommend that you do it now.
Well, then I guess I'll have to come to the next one if I have comments about this one.
Okay,
At the beginning of the next one.
sounds like a plan.
Does that work for you?
That's fine with us. I just don't want you to miss out.
She can still talk about an agenda item.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, if there's an agenda item.
Right, so that's what she's for.
Oh, you're here for one of the agenda items.
I might be.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll get there in a minute. So we're moving on from citizen input. We got nothing. So we'll move on to new business, which is item number 4, which there appears to be none of that either. So we have no new business. And now we're on to our public hearing. The first public hearing for tonight is TA 22-03, Heritage and Landmark Commission text amendments. Now we'll go ahead and read this. So the matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on the matter and are present in the chamber, please fill out a testimony card and give it to the recording secretary. One of these. At the appropriate time, your name will be called. Please step forward to the microphone. If attending online, please type in the chat your full name and whether you would like to speak as a proponent or an opponent on the matter. At the appropriate time, when your name is called, please unmute yourself. In all cases, please state your name, address, and interest in the matter for the record. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may pool time from one another. In so doing, those individuals may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. In these cases, please include a list with names and addresses of those pooling their time to turn in with the testimony card listing the spokesperson's information. All questions must be directed through me, the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to be entered into the permanent record. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable review criteria as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations, which the person believes apply to the decision. Failure to raise any issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Failure of the applicant to, well, we don't need to read that. We don't have an applicant. We're going to just sort of speed this up and say the As far as how this is going to work, the city staff will give a brief report regarding the application. The hearing body will ask any questions of staff regarding the report. The chair will open the public hearing for testimony. The applicant will be given not more than 20 minutes to present on the application. Proponents and opponents will then speak in that order for not more than 3 minutes each. The applicant will then be given 10 minutes for rebuttal. The hearing body will ask any final questions of staff and the applicant. The chair will then close the public hearing for new testimony. The hearing body will deliberate on the application with no additional testimony unless specifically allowed by the chair. This may result in the reopening of the public hearing. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of the date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions regarding the procedure that has been outlined for the hearing? Fantastic. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest, please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Anybody? Okay. Also, if any member of the hearing body has any ex parte contact with anyone prior to the hearing, including a visit to the site, which doesn't really exist, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Does any member of the audience in the chamber or online have any questions of any commissioner regarding conflicts of interest or ex parte contact? If so, please direct them through the chair at this time. Fantastic. So now we will begin with receiving the staff report, and we will turn it over to, oh my gosh, why did I just forget your name? Jamie Stickle. That's right.
That's okay. I often forget my own name. Good evening.
Take it away, Jamie.
Planning Commission. I'm Jamie Stickle. I'm the Director of Economic Development. And tonight before you, I have the Historic Code update. As you'll remember, in mid-June, we discussed the proposed updates at a work session. So some of this information, or most of this information, will not be new news to you. It was also included in the packet with the staff report. Because we had done that work session, and we can decide this kind of once we work through some of these slides, but staff was talking today about whether you would like to go through the proposed amendments, the PDF proposed amendments code or line by line, or I have some of those highlights as refreshed in the staff report and in this presentation. So it could be that we just drill down into some very specific, if anybody has any questions or anything that is.
Chair Patton, would it be helpful to have a slight refresh? What my thought is, there weren't very many questions during the work session, and to maybe focus on those instead of having Jamie go through line by line the entire code package.
Yeah, what I was going to suggest is, I believe if we've all done our homework, we've had a chance to read through the proposed amendments, and I'll just kind of go down the list to see if anybody has any questions regarding them. Commissioner Ewert, do you have any?
I've got one, and the staff report, turn my thing on here. Staff report, second paragraph, where it talks about it was utilized through the 1990s until early 2000s when the Historic Review Board was disbanded. Then it says, during that time, the Historic Review Board worked on many worthy projects, such as the 2009 reconnaissance level survey. My question would be, if it was disbanded, if the board was disbanded, who was doing that work in 2009, if they disbanded in 2000? Or am I reading that incorrectly?
No, you're not. There was none.
There was no historic review board at that time.
Okay.
So somebody from the city must have hired a consultant to do the reconnaissance survey. City staff.
Okay, all right. And then the other question I have is, on page 5 of 5 of your staff report in 16.110.080, the second bullet, it says clarifies that the HLC is responsible for reviewing and making decisions on proposed alterations, eliminates redundant language and corrects the language. Can you give me some examples of what that would be?
Well, I could pull up the Historic Preservation Planning Code, and so that
Are
we
you
could.
talking about the whole code in that comment, or?
For reviewing, make decision on proposed, it would be, I guess I don't fully understand what your question.
Okay, when it talks about alterations, we're taking retitle to alterations. That second bullet there, I'm not quite clear on what that.
So I think it means that my understanding is that it means that the Heritage and Landmark Commission would be responsible for reviewing and making decisions on the alterations to historic buildings. So for instance, the historic Canby City Hall, if the alterations come forward, that they would be in charge of reviewing and making the decisions if you could move forward on replacing the door with the historic, a historic door or something like that, and then just eliminates the redundant language that they believed was in that section of the code.
I'd just like to add to that in Commissioner Ewart on 16.110.080 under A purpose, what Jamie just said, and essentially it's just clarifying that HLC will have that review authority, and which is what they've been doing consistently on other projects.
And to kind of further what he's saying, so what what was proposed to be included, it actually says, the intent of this subsection is to provide the procedures and criteria utilized by the Heritage and Landmarks Commission to review and render decisions on any proposal to alter the exterior of a historic landmark. So we have 4 on our historic landmark list, or contributing resource within a designated historic district, which we do not have at this time, and on all new construction subject to a building permit on a property where a historic landmark is located or within a historic district. And it had removed language that said that it was appropriate, that it was to provide the appropriate level of review for proposed new construction, alterations, and development. So it just expands on that language a bit.
Okay, now, and just to quantify here, these properties, whatever they may be, are properties that the owner of that property has said, we want to be part of this.
Yes.
Okay.
So each of them have gone through an
No,
application
not
process.
really, sorry.
No?
It's the registered, it's properties that are registered or within a registered historic district, which, as Jamie said, we don't have a registered historic district. We have 4 properties that are registered in town.
Okay,
5, sorry.
Oh, 'cause of
5.
the national.
One's national.
Yeah.
okay, so like, just help me work through this.
Yes.
So let's just say the Bear House. Is it on the list or
No.
not on the list?
Yes.
It is on the list.
Yes.
Okay, so if I own the Bear House and I'm on the list and you use the example of the door and I wanted to replace the door, I would have to come to the HLC and ask permission, or let me do a different example. Doors.
And I use the door just because City Hall
Yeah,
is
I know.
putting on a new.
Door's a bad
historic door.
example. I think if I remember correctly, there's a bathroom in that house. I forget whether it's on the first floor or the second floor. But let's just say the bathroom's on the first floor. And let's say I wanted to put a bathroom on the second floor. I would have to come to the HLC and say, this is what I want to do, and
The answer is it depends.
Right. I think that
Some are historic interior and some aren't.
Okay.
Some are registered, like the City Hall, the interior is not, it was, I don't know, redone in the 60s or something. So if they wanted to put a bathroom in there, it doesn't matter because the integrity was gone a long time ago. I don't know that house specifically, but what they would do is go to the planning commission, the planning department first. And if it's considered a major alteration, then it comes to the HLC.
Like on the Night House, the siding was a good example of, they replaced, right? They replaced the siding on the historic Night House, which is over on Southwest 4th Avenue.
Okay.
And they were updating that building. And so that the siding itself, the kinds of siding that they were replacing was not bringing forward the historic integrity and keeping that integrity. And so that went before the Heritage and Landmark Commission.
And
Because it was a major alteration.
It was a major alteration, yes.
And how, I'm just working through this in my head. I don't know, it all sounds like it could be a good thing. I'm just curious as to the benefit. Now, it goes from houses that are 50 years and older, correct? So 50-year-old house is gonna have T1 siding on it, T11 siding on it. Now, if they wanna put different siding on that house, are they going to, which I think T11 looks uglier than mud on a baby's face, but are they gonna have to put that kind of siding back on to keep the integrity of the house? Are we going to that level of
Typically, homeowners that make a decision to register a property, they know what they're getting into, or they buy a registered property, they know what they're getting into. They could unregister them if they want to do that.
Another question I
But
had.
it changes regularly. I mean, I had a house that everybody wanted it registered, but we didn't. Our neighbors were both registered, so I've been through all of this, not in Canby.
Okay.
But typically, you know what you're getting into. And the documentation, in fact, we're working on some very specific documentation right now to help homeowners make some of those decisions about what am I getting into. There's a lot of it on websites, but something really more specific. But to answer your question, if that was part of the integrity of a home that was from that era, then yes, they would have to come to the Heritage and that, if they registered it.
If they yeah, that's
If
what
it was registered.
Only if it was registered. So if your home, I think you live in a home that's 100 years old or something along those lines. And so if it wasn't on the, if it wasn't registered on the historic landmarks list, then it would not be subject to any of the requirements or
Okay.
are coming to the heritage.
So then, the other question I would have is, house is on the list, house sells. New owners don't want it on the list. They submit application to our planning department or to who,
It depends.
okay?
It depends on if it's a nationally registered or not.
I'm not talking about national registry.
Well, we
I'm
do
talking
have
about
that.
What we're doing here in Canby.
We do have a nationally registered property.
No, I'm
Oh,
sure we
okay.
do.
Okay.
But I'm talking about just what we do here in Canby. Can the new owners say, I don't want to play?
No,
They can't. Once they're on it, it's on it.
Yeah, it should have been disclosed to them. It's part of the zoning. There's a historic overlay zoning on that property. And it's full disclosure. It's up to the realtor to make sure that that's stated.
but you can delist a nationally registered property. I know that because I had a neighbor that did.
Yeah, it's really hard.
They had to pay a lot of back taxes because they got tax benefits, but, so that seems odd that a person with a nationally registered can, but a locally registered cannot.
And just pragmatically, I would think that would be a real difficult scenario for
Yeah.
someone to arguably do that situation and go in and say, I'm going to take a recognized historic landmark site, purposely buy it to convert it. Seems a little bit going against the intent of the ordinance as well.
And the federal is 20, is it 15 years or 25 years? I can't remember. I think it's 15. And then after the 15 years for
Yeah.
nationally registered, they can decide to keep it for another 15 years or not. And I had neighbors that did that and some that didn't. Some that said, my 15 years is done and took it off. But I don't know how the locally, if there's time consideration on a locally registered, I don't know.
My concern is, coming from what you just said, Dawn, is that we're depending on the realtor to disclose the information to the new buyer. A lot of times that handoff doesn't happen. It doesn't happen with property lines, it doesn't happen with easements, it doesn't happen with all kinds of things. And so I don't want to open up a can of worms here that gets us into trouble.
Sure.
Because what it would be us, it would just be, it makes our jobs hard enough, let alone adding more level to it. So, and the only other question I would have in this would be, going back to this first paragraph, and I said this when we talked about it before, if at some point this HLC becomes a non-viable situation, by voting to approve this, we're shifting responsibilities from Planning Commission to HLC, which I'm cool with that, if as long as it stays a workable entity. And so that's.
So noted. I would just recognize, just kind of as a staff person, that the HLC committee seems extremely energized. It's going to a ton of trainings and reporting back. I just received an email from Commissioner Jarosh on a topical issue about converting second-story upstairs unit areas and the challenges with historic buildings. So I know they're doing a lot of trainings. There seems to be energy with that group. And I think if anything, if that started to fade, we'd know way in advance of that to be able to replace that, not holding up anybody in context of their process of what they're doing. And I think they're doing a good job. And I also feel like they're very committed. And it seems like that organization is thriving, if anything, at this point.
Yeah, and I attended one of their meetings the other night. It was good. It was all great. I just am curious as to whether or not we should put anything in here so we have a fallback, any type of wording, so we have a fallback that if things didn't go forward with the HLC, that somehow we still have the ability to make decisions. That's because we're giving them decision-making power here.
And the worst case scenario would be that applicant would not have any permission authority granted until such time as the city came up with that process.
Okay.
I mean, it's a type 3 hearing process. Just because that group might not exist, it still doesn't mean that permit is acceptable. It would still have to go through and be authorized.
That's all I have. Thank
Okay. Vice Chair Hutchison?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Calkins?
I don't have any questions. I have some thoughts and some statements on things if there's discussion later, or we're doing it all at the same time?
Lay that out there.
Okay. Let me, just one thing, which is under 16.110.025, around the majority of the members living or working in the urban growth boundary. And I definitely can appreciate the struggle of trying to recruit for such boards. But I personally, and these are kind of matters that are resolved at the city council level, I personally feel that the spirit of all of these, of all our board, the library board, Heritage Landmark, all the different boards that they have, the Park Advisory Committee, they're citizen committees. And, we've got, as we have citizens, people who live in the city of Canby pay the taxes and fees and that live here. And I understand that for like our board, you can go to the UGB. Some of the things that happen are outside the city limits, so it makes sense. On the library board, you can, you have a certain amount that have to be in the city limits, and then some are in the library district that is a different kind of boundary. And I guess my concern with removing this, it's not even in the city limits, it's in the UGB, is that we, over time, people leave, people retire from the board, we could find ourselves in a situation where we have a Heritage Landmark board that's a majority of people who don't live anywhere around here, may not be community minded, may have outside business interests, and aren't interested in keeping heritage. And so that's a concern to me. Okay. To remove something like that. I do believe that all of our citizens should be as close to the city as we can be. I don't think any of us would argue that Canby is very community-minded. And so I just wanted to bring up that piece.
Okay,
I would second that too.
okay. Anything else? I'll take that as a no. Commissioner Jarosh.
I think a lot of what we were doing with the changes was cleaning up language, so a lot of it's sort of superfluous, I guess, but there are some meaty things that we've talked about, which is great. I'm the one actually that proposed this change to the location of the members, and that's because as chair, I have been unable to keep a full set of folks on the commission. And I've had some great applicants, and I mean great, that just don't happen to live in the city limits. We even have a member who's very active. She lives in Aurora, but she lives in a historic home and she understands that whole process. But she's one of our most active members. I live about as far out of Canby as you can get and still call it Canby. I live next door to Malala, and I'm a very active citizen. I mean, I know I didn't take offense or anything. Please don't think so. But it's just it's the bare bones fact that we can't keep a full set of members. And we've had great applicants and we've had to turn them away, and I hate to do that. So, but I get what you're saying. It's just hard. It's hard on all the commissions to keep a full set, really. It's interesting because I would like the city dwelling folks in town, right in downtown, to be super interested in this, but I mean, everybody's busy, but we just can't get the members. So that's the pure and simple reason why I did that.
Okay. Commissioner Ellison?
Just one question. With these changes and having gone through a little bit the background on it, does this committee enter into a semi-judicial kind of a situation similar to what we are as Planning Commission?
They have the same authority for historically designated properties as the Planning Commission. It's a type 3 process for HLC. Planning Commission is a type 3 process, so they are an equivalent board, but their focus is far more narrow than the Planning Commission, which is quite broad. So they're not dealing with, growth management policies or those kinds of things. You guys are parklets or fences and, the broad range of topical issues that you guys deal with in addition to design review projects and subdivisions. But they are an equivalently powered board with a more narrow focus.
So for instance, like a public, but for like a public hearing that might happen with alteration to a building, in my 10 years of being with the city, I think we've had 3 public hearings or so, something along those lines. And usually we work with the planning department also on those efforts, just because they are efforts that are typically, an alteration to a historic building. They're efforts that are going through the planning department but have to just take a little pit stop with the Heritage and Landmarks Commission.
So that actually made me think of another question then. For the purpose of historical preservation in the state, is an HLC the same city by city? They all have the same standards, or the state has the same standards for every city? Or does every city have its own set of standards for historical registry?
They're probably they're similar, but I don't think there's one-stop shop. You could read other cities and they'd be really similar to ours, but not to my knowledge. I don't think the state has ever dictated. Do you, Carol?
They've got the model code out there.
Yeah, model.
There's a
Yeah.
model code. And you have to hit certain things in order to retain certified local government status. And that's the Secretary of Interior standards for that.
So would the regulatory body for this be the state of Oregon per se, or is it? So if there was some sort of a dispute or anything like that, is that going to be something that?
It would go, it could be appealed. Does it go to the planning commission and then city council, or straight to city
It
council?
goes to the city council.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then it goes to the land use.
Yeah,
plan.
LUBA.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. And then for me, so if, for instance, a homeowner were to want to make a change and they go to the historic landmark commission and the landmark commission says, no, you can't do these things. Do they appeal that? It sounds like they would appeal that to the city council. That does not come across the planning commission's desk, does it?
No.
No, okay. Is there a avenue for them to bring it across the planning commission's desk?
It's specifically designed to not ever
To not do that, okay?
come across the planning commission's desk.
Okay, that was the only question that I had. Are there any other questions of the commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to, let me get back to my thingy here. We will now open the public hearing regarding TA 22-03 Heritage and Landmark Commission text amendment. We have already received our presentation from the applicant / the city. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Jamie?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so now we'll move on to, we will now hear from proponents of this application for not more than 3 minutes each unless you are a representative of a group pooling your time. I have one card for Carol Palmer. Carol, if you'd like to come up and state your name, address, and go from there.
Sure. Is this on?
It is on, yep.
Cool. The only reason I'm here is to answer your questions. I just wanted to make sure, Carol Palmer, 1646, am I supposed to give my address too?
Yeah.
1646 North Ponderosa Street, Canby. You asked, Commissioner, you asked the question, have we had owner approval on all of these 5 properties that we have on the historic register now? And the answer is no, because the need for owner approval was not enacted by the state legislature until 2000. So there are 4 properties on the list that were designated prior to 2000. And so they are enshrined, actually they're in the code. There's a portion of the Historic Review Board code that if you read it, or of this code, if you read it, you'll see that those properties are designated there. And then the one property we've added since that time is the City Hall, Holly Street City Hall. And of course we have owner approval for that. Your next question was about interiors and doing things to interiors. Very, very typically, most properties that are in a local register, the interior has been lost a long time ago. And so the typical thing across most states, and we're practicing that here, is the only thing we're looking at is the exterior. That's all. So you can put in that bathroom, you can upgrade that kitchen. We really don't go into those areas at all. Nationally, they might do that, but not locally. Siding, the siding came up. What do you want to do about that T1 siding? When we approved the redo of the exterior of the Night House, that was shiplap siding, 1880s, I think, something like that. I'm sure they've replaced it a couple times since then. But they put up some of that hardy board, is that what it's called? Or Thank you. And the whole idea was it had to look like shiplap. We weren't going to make them go back and put shiplap on there. So the same thing is true, is if for example, in the City Hall, there's some updates that are going to be made to the opening that used to be where the library was, and there were carriage doors there. Well, the Hanlon organization is going to be putting carriage doors there but they're not exactly the same doors, and we wouldn't even want them to be exactly the same doors because you don't want to give the false impression that that was indeed the historic doors that were there. But they give the same feeling and the same, what do I want to say? When you look at them, it doesn't degrade from the rest of the building. It fits in with the rest of the property. So there's a lot of leeway in a lot of these things. Another thing I wanted to bring up, you talk about changing, you mentioned changing from the responsibility from the Planning Commission to the Historic Landmark Commission. That doesn't have anything to do, that particular section is not about decision-making. It's about doing inventories. It's about that kind of work. And so the Historic and Landmark Commission has always had responsibility for making the decisions on alterations. That section of the code has not changed. We've not substituted HLC for PC in any place except in that one spot where it's just about sort of the work that is done to identify properties. In terms of, Mr. Ellison, you had a question about the judicial implications. We've always had that. This code change does not change anything about the responsibility the Heritage and Landmark Commission has to be making those kinds of decisions. Oh, and I wanted to add one more thing. There is one time when your group does get involved, and in fact, you've got one of those coming up soon, if I'll ever get it done. We're designating, no laughing, we're designating the Depot Museum as a historic landmark. So that particular process first gets approved by the Heritage and Landmark Commission, and then the second step is it comes to you folks, because you're the only ones that can change the zoning and give it the historic zoning overlay. And so that's the decision that you'll be making, but that's pretty fast. It doesn't take too long. I think that's it.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay. Would you like to speak on anything? Or you're still listening? Okay, great. So with that, if there are no more opponents, or proponents, we will go ahead and move into opponents. And unless there's a flood of people that come in here in a few seconds, there appears to be no opponents. So, Jamie, would you like your 10 minutes of rebuttal?
I don't think that's necessary. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Do we have any other questions based on information that we have now received? Commissioner Ewert. Uh-oh, what have I done?
I don't know how to pose this question, but I'm going to throw it out there. I did attend the HLC meeting that they had, when was it? Last week?
Monday, yeah.
Monday, okay. Good meeting. But I had a curious thing about it, and it falls into this. There was a lot of time spent talking about the buildings at the fairgrounds. The buildings at the fairground, even though they are in Canby, are not really in Canby. And it seemed like there was a lot of, was it Vortex?
Northwest Vernacular.
Who?
Northwest Vernacular.
Yes, that one. They spent a lot of time talking about those buildings. So I guess my question is when we have them, and I don't have a problem with that, it's just with the HLC, when we talk about your scope, if those buildings aren't, and we spent obviously a lot of their consulting money on those buildings, looking at those, does your scope extend to properties that are not belonging to the city of Canby, that are actually belong to Clackamas County?
Yes, so because they're contributing resources, and I'm going to give an answer, and then I'll look to both Judy and Carol, because they have far more information, I'm sure, than I do. But they're contributing resources, even though they're not on a historic list at this time, within the city of Canby. And those efforts were done as a way to do a deep dive on some of those buildings in partnership with the fairgrounds. They were very aware that we were digging into those. And it came from conversations years ago with the Fair Board of wanting to know more about those buildings. While they're not City of Canby buildings, they are important and carry a history that is greater than some of the city's buildings that we would have. And so those efforts were done in particular as they consider, the future of what the fairgrounds looks like, so that we can hopefully, retain some of that historic integrity, whether that's buildings themselves or the story around them. And many of our efforts over the years have been on buildings that aren't owned by a public entity at all. For instance, we've done intensive level surveys that have done great research on buildings that exist in Canby, but some of them also are sites in Canby. So we have a downtown walking trail that focuses on 10 sites. One of those sites is Waite Park. Another site would be the historic City Hall. But a third site, and I always think that this is really interesting, is actually what used to be the old Vineyards business, which is where Bikes and More is. And that building actually burnt down and was rebuilt. And so we have a historic plaque outside of that building that is on a stand. So it's not necessarily on the building like many of the others that you see. Wells Fargo is another good example, but it helps to tell that story and preserve the story. And I don't think that, well, I was gonna say I don't think anybody, but I can't speak that broadly. I think most people, when you get to know about Canby, even though it is owned by Clackamas County and run by Clackamas County, when you think about Canby, you think about the fair and rodeo and the history of what that has done for Canby over the years, I think is something worth preserving. So that's why we focused our efforts, and I would be happy to.
I just wanted to add before Carol
Okay.
speaks, Commissioner Ewart, the property's been annexed to the city of Canby. So it's not a county property, so it's inside the city limits. So the city is sovereign, city has authority over that property.
Really? That didn't come out the other night.
Greg Parker brought that up because he was on the fair board for many years. So on Monday, I didn't know. I said, is that in the city or the county? And Greg knew, Councilor Parker,
Okay,
yeah.
well then that changes that question. And by the way, it was Red's Automotive Shop where the bicycle thing is, that's what burnt down.
You answered it. Yeah, thank you, Jamie.
Okay, any other questions?
Good questions.
Yeah. Okay, seeing no more questions, we will go ahead and I will close the public hearing and we will go into discussion and deliberation. So first things first, I have two things down that we, as far as sort of lead discussion points would be, should we put language in the code as a backup for if the group becomes defunct? What are folks' thoughts on that?
That occurred to me when Commissioner Ewert brought it up earlier today, but I also thought if that were to occur, and as Don said, they would probably be aware of that happening, then there could just be another meeting like this and you could just change it back, I guess. But
Wouldn't the city council have to be involved in that though?
this does have to go to the council, right, to approval, that's true.
Yeah, but I don't, I am all for baking in language that kind of heads these sort of things off at the pass. But to be honest with you, and I'm not bitter about this, but most of the times I've tried to say we should put language in there like that, it's not been necessary. And so a part of me feels that really, considering, first of all, the number, just looking at the grand scope of things, the possibility of someone having an application that they bring to this group to find out that they aren't active, if the city has not already known that they weren't active and made some sort of change in order to fix that, then I see that being odd, that would not already be taken care of before that point. But even if not, it would essentially take 30 days to get that fixed and make that change. And if they're going through this process, I don't see where 30 days would be that onerous, considering the possibility of this happening.
If there was a major application, let's hypothetically speak to not a minor alteration of somebody changing out a door, that would be minor, would be administrative, but a major alteration to a building, there would be fairly extensive work like the historic city hall. They'd have to hire an architect to go through that process, go through the application materials, identify all the materials. That process for the city hall was probably, on the consultant side, was probably about 6 weeks plus at least. It might have been 8 weeks before they got all the materials together to submit. So there would be significant time to address that issue, I think, to bring that back forward. But it's your discretion. If you wouldn't want to add language in there, that's fine. But I'm just pointing out that I believe there would be time to address that, to allow the applicant to still submit the application, even though the HLC was not, the body was not staff, so to speak.
Okay. Commissioner Ebert?
Can you think of a situation where we would bump into the 120-day rule? If we had the HLC that had responsibility and they weren't staffed, as we say, enough to make a decision, would we run into a 120-day rule on anything?
I mean, it's possible. I think the HLC, unlike the planning commission, their agendas are not packed. I mean, I'm not saying that in a way that they've got a lot of stuff to discuss, but they don't have hearing upon hearing upon hearing. So I would say that would, in my opinion, not be an issue, because I think it'd be relatively easy. There's notice, but it's not like you're gonna have to wait because you're stacked up with other applicants. And I think it just doesn't seem like it would be that challenging.
Okay. So we'll just do kind of a test here. Commissioner Ellison, what are your, do you feel that there should be language or not?
No.
Commissioner Jarosh?
I think the risk is really minimal. I mean, the HLC has had this responsibility for many years, and there's so few applications and changes, so few registered properties and so few changes. I think the risk is really low.
Okay. Final thoughts, Commissioner Calkins?
Oh, I agree.
Okay. Vice Chair Hutchinson?
I think it's an easy change if necessary and not necessary now.
Okay. Commissioner Ewert?
I'm gonna go with the prevailing winds here and just say,
Let it ride.
let it ride.
You know, change it another time.
Okay, sounds like a plan. So if we put that one to bed. The second one is the fact that the net is cast quite wide as far as membership, and should it be narrowed more to within the city limits. This time, we'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Ellison.
I feel like the expertise takes precedence over the proximity in this particular instance.
Okay. Commissioner Jarosh?
Yes, please. Our most active members are all outside the city limits right
Okay.
now, currently, yeah.
Commissioner Calkins?
I wasn't interested in like shrinking, making it more restrictive than it is now. So right now, it's the way it's stated is the majority has to be within the UGB, but there are some that can be outside the UGB, and and none of them have to be in the city limits, right?
Right.
So I'm just proposing just keeping it the way it is.
Okay.
And not trying to restrict it even more so.
Okay.
So, and I appreciate the what you're saying, absolutely, and how hard it is, but I do feel that way for all the boards, so.
Okay. Excellent. Commissioner or Vice Chair Hutchinson?
I think active interest is probably the most important thing when it comes to historic preservation.
Okay. And Commissioner Ewert?
I am with Commissioner Calkins on this. I think that, I would like to, personally, I think we could probably maybe put some wording in there that would say at least 50% of the board is within the UGB or within the city limits, with something of that nature, at least half. I'm willing to go there. Otherwise, we would just leave it the way it is.
Anybody want for a 50%?
Chair Padden, if I might add something to
Sure.
the equation here, perhaps saying within Clackamas County would be sufficient.
Marion County's awfully close.
I guess for me, it's one of these, this again goes back to the point that we were talking about as far as, if changes need to be made, that they can be made. I would foresee that if, to me, the feeling that I get from why this is coming up is we don't want outside interests to come in and take control of this process. Is that the fear?
I mean, that is one of the concerns.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Commissioner Ewert, is that one of the concerns?
I would agree, that's not the top of the list.
Yeah.
I would
Okay.
agree. You always have that possibility. I mean, we have those rules in town because in our system, in our process, for a reason. And I mean, I get it that it's hard to find members within, and I get it that we can find people. I mean, heck, we could go to Washington, Virginia, and find somebody that's really great on historic stuff, and they could be on Zoom meetings and do it, but that's not Canby. That's not us. And I would just really, you know, I know it might be hard, but there's. I mean, what do we got? We got thousands of people here in town. We got to be able to find. And of course, I say that we have an empty chair up here.
We've had it for a long time.
Maybe I could add something. The work that we do is a pretty broad scope of heritage work, and talking about, you know, changes to registered properties is the minimal. I mean, we do hardly any of that, but we attend conferences and we do spend time with other people, so we know the standards, and that's what's really important. And we work through those reconnaissance surveys with the consultants, and we learn a lot from that, and we document all that so we know what we have and what's at risk or what's at stake. But a lot of what we do is just something we need feet on the ground, butt in a chair, hands on a computer. We do a lot of grant work, and it doesn't have to be somebody that's an expert in that particular genre. And it's really hard, I mean, almost impossible to recruit people. They don't have to know how to work on a grant, but just to do that type of work and be that detail oriented and work through the state and work through the consultants and manage a budget. And they're not necessarily things that require a lot of heritage background. I came to the Heritage and Landmark Commission with zero heritage background.
Sure.
But I can knock grants out like you wouldn't believe, and that's what brings the money in. And then we also do a lot of headstone scrubbing. I mean, how many headstones? We've scrubbed 400 in the last 4 years, not just at one cemetery. And so we consult with other cemeteries now. So it's knee pads on, butt in the mud, scrubbing. And so we need a lot of, excuse my language, but we really have a lot of work going on, and we could do a lot more if we had more involved people that can actually, you know, do things for us. And it's just been really hard to get that.
And that's the plight. I mean, the Canby Lions Club is getting ready to go away because,
Oh yeah, it's hard.
I mean, I don't care what your organization is, that is a problem. So I guess I have some thoughts on this, but Commissioner Hutchinson?
Well, I was just looking at the Canby Historic Preservation Planning Code and, you know, 16.110.10, Section A, foster community pride and a sense of cultural identity, where every other item in that section refers to what goes on inside the city. But the very first line, Section A, is about community, which, as we know, extends beyond city limits. You know, I worked at the Canby, at the, you know, school district for years, and, you know, the number of people who consider themselves Canby people is far beyond the city limits. And so, I mean, you know, I think there's a certain, I worry more about somebody who's moved far away from Canby and gets on this board and wants it to stay exactly the same. So when they come back for Christmas every year, it doesn't change, which of course is impossible. But, you know, I really think that what we need to do with resolving this is just decide what our community is and our culture is and make it inclusive to that.
Well, and I was gonna, so in listening to all this, I'll throw this out as an idea. What if we were, so it was mentioned, you know, Clackamas County, but the fact that we're very close to Marion County, you know, there's expertise about heritage and landmark stuff in Multnomah County and, you know, maybe somebody down in Redmond. Would it maybe make sense to limit it to, you have to be a resident of Oregon?
Of where?
Of Oregon.
Of the state?
Of the state.
Would that reduce some of the heartburn for, you know, a hostile takeover from areas outside of the area?
One thought, though, is because they are quasi-judicial, I can't say that word, it is mildly concerning that somebody or peoples from outside the area albeit it's probably never going to happen, but it is something to just put in the back of your mind. If they did have an issue and it went to the next level and then it went past the next level out to Luba, that would be one risk to consider, but it sounds like the majority of what takes place is, like she was saying, scrubbing, out in the grass and getting it done, doing work. And the grant money comes, I'm sure, from all different sources outside of Canby. So that's where I'm a little torn, to be honest with you. I mean, the only thing that I would consider to be risky would be the Luba effect.
And I think on that part, Commissioner Jarosh, could you speak to the appointment process? Is the council involved with that?
Well, just the way they are with all commissions and
Okay,
boards, yes.
so I think there's a vetting already to
Yeah.
that point, which largely solves the whole issue, in my belief. I mean, would the city council appoint someone that would be trying to take over in a bad way?
That is a good point. I forgot about
Which I
that.
think that would speak to everything that we do at the city,
Yeah,
that there is a process.
yes. So the way I'm feeling this is that we're kind of torn. Do we whether we want to put, so there's 2.5 people, I think, that want some sort of limitations. Do we want to hash out a limitation, or are we good with leaving it as is? And what sword do people want to die on?
I need more headstone scrubbers.
She needs more headstone scrubbers. Commissioner Ewert, I mean, I would be for putting in some sort of sensible thing, whether it is the state of Oregon or Clackamas and Marion County or something along those lines, so that there is some guardrails on it. But for me, that's about as far as I would be willing to go to get behind this. I guess this is is this the lobbying phase of this particular discussion?
You know, I don't have a problem with you bringing stone scrubbers in from LA. I have a problem with that. They can scrub a stone just as well as anybody else. I'm talking about the people that we have on a decision-making body in Canby, I think should be from at least a minimum of our UGB. Minimum. I just feel strongly about that. I do not know why we would, I can come to a consensus on everything else that's in this package,
But this is the one.
but I'm not, and there's some things that I gotta tell you, I question. But I've just seen so much dilution of the process over the years. We're Canbyites. We're Canby. We're not Wilsonville, we're not Salem, we're not Portland, we're Canby. And I think that the people, if it's important, if historical structures are important to the people of Canby, there'll be people of Canby come on the board. I can honestly say that if planning process for the city of Canby was truly, truly important to the citizenry of Canby, this chair wouldn't have my briefcase sitting in it, it'd have a warm body sitting in it.
Well, I think by the time we hear Amazon, there'll be a body in that seat.
Well, whatever, okay, I'm just,
Unfortunately.
my point is,
Yeah.
is that Canby needs to take care of Canby. I'm not into this moving out to different counties, moving out to the state. I mean, if we're gonna move out to do that, Washington and Oregon or Washington and California are close too. I mean, let's,
Sure.
you know, I'm just thinking this isn't, we need to just be careful what we're doing here.
Okay.
As a planning commissioner, I feel like we're just borderline with some of this code change thing. I'm willing to make it happen. I'm not willing to let a bunch of outside people, and I'll just say it, come into our town and make decisions. And I realize that there's not that many decisions, but if we could just accommodate that one line in there, I think it would be extremely helpful.
Okay. Did you have your hand raised?
No.
No, okay. Commissioner Calkins.
I was just going to reiterate that I feel strongly about this as well, and I think
Okay.
just in a general sense. And I think Commissioner Ellison brought up a good point that I was thinking about too, that, if it were just, the grant writing and the information gathering, all the great work that they do, I might not care as much. But now that they have this quasi judicial piece.
That's not new though.
Yeah, just let it
Oh,
go.
okay.
Sorry.
All right. That, I think it does, make a difference. So, but I think, making like the idea of like, Oregon or counties or something, it doesn't really do anything, I think that, I don't know if that's necessary. So
Okay.
we may just need to vote.
Well, I mean, okay, so we've got two folks for putting on guardrails. Commissioner Jarosh says we need to keep it more open. I personally I've got one toe in the boat for wanting to see some guardrails put on. I don't think, at least so that there is some contingent of Canby on the board, whether it be, how many members are on the board?
Currently, there are 6,
How many seats are there?
7,
There's 7 seats
and,
total
but those have not been filled in 2 years.
in 2 years, okay.
Minimum is 3.
Minimum, what?
It can go down to 3.
That was something that was done back in 2013 so that we could restart the board.
Yeah.
But then it was brought up to 7 members, just
Long
like
time ago.
many of our boards and committees.
So four would be,
7, I
four would be a quorum, and to your question, I believe. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So they need 4.
Okay,
Yeah.
4 is quorum. So of the current makeup of the Heritage Landmark Commission, how many people are Canby Met residents, like in the UR, in the urban growth boundary, and how many are not?
3 and 3.
So it's a 50-50 split.
And the 3 that are most active and have the most skill set are all outside the
That's
growth
fine.
boundary,
So currently it's,
Chair Patton?
including me.
yeah,
And I just wanted to note that currently the way that it is written, it is live or work within the urban growth boundary.
True.
So
Okay.
that just,
It's written how?
it is written that it's, that the majority of Heritage and Landmarks
hasn't
Commission
helped.
voting members shall reside or work inside Canby's urban growth boundary.
a majority, okay. So they're currently meeting that because they're 50-50. Well, it's kind of, yeah.
The other thing is, the other boards, they all have different rules about this. It's really fascinating. We're the only one that has the live or work thing, which is interesting.
Yes.
But there's no consistency across the boards and commissions, so.
There isn't, and that is another thing that drives me crazy, but that was. a
Probably,
city
maybe it's a problem to solve at a higher level.
I think it is. But at least for this one, I mean, so the way I see it now is Commissioner Ewert is for guardrails. Commissioner Calkins is for guardrails. Commissioner Ellison, you're good as is. Commissioner Hutchinson?
I agree with Commissioner Jarosh.
Okay. And, for me, I see the plight of what's going on with other groups, and I think that this membership thing is something that the city council really is going to need to dig into more. And then, okay, so Commissioner Jarosh is for leaving it alone. Yes?
I did have my hand up, and I was going to say I'm completely in favor of dumping it entirely on city council.
Okay. Very good. So at this point in time, while I appreciate where Commissioner Ellison or Commissioner Ewert and Commissioner Calkins are coming from, a majority of the council is for leaving it as is and letting that process hash itself out. So, bam, I think that's that. Any last words on that? I'm sorry. Okay. Was there anything else as far as questions, concerns, changes? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Hold on a second. Let me get to my little paper. I made myself a thing here. Okay.
So I move to approve the changes to the code, I don't know the number, to the heritage code within the planning code.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and it's been moved by Commissioner Jarosh and seconded by Commissioner Hutchison to approve TA 22-03 Heritage and Landmark Commission text amendment with changes and exceptions as noted in the staff report. Is there any discussion on the motion for approval? Commissioner Ewert?
I just want to make one discussion. So as it's written, it says that the membership, can you read that again, Jamie?
Yeah,
I'm
so
sorry.
this is, as it's written without any amendments at this time, is that the membership, voting members shall reside or work inside Canby's urban growth boundary. It's a majority of Heritage and Landmarks Commission voting members shall reside or work inside Canby's urban growth boundary. So that's how it sits today, separate from the amendment. The amendment would remove that line.
And
the
change it to just up in the air,
To anybody can be on it.
okay?
Correct. Okay. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving TA 22-03 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
There are 2 nays. Are there any abstentions? None noted. The motion carries. Okay. So with that, we will now move on to our second public hearing, which is the Thermoglass Warehouse DR 22-06.
Chair Padden, before you launch into that, the applicant is requesting a date certain continuance for this application to August 22nd. And I can give you some explanation around that if that is helpful.
Please do, because I'm ready to go.
Okay.
I have
There
questions.
was some complexity to the right-of-way dedication issues on this project, and I think the applicant, there was some perhaps misunderstanding about the right-of-way dedication. I'm not sure if the city is completely off the hook in terms of ownership on that, but I would say that probably the majority of it was the applicant being unaware of the complete dedication necessary, resulting in the need to redesign the site versus coming before you for a variance.
Okay.
That's a nutshell version of this.
Okay.
That's gonna be expensive.
So I guess my question is, the way that I understand this process works is if an applicant has requested and has come up to have their application reviewed by this body, it is because there is a reasonable understanding that that application is good to go, correct? At least to me,
Yeah.
it seems like when we get to this point of the process, that the applicant has worked it out with the city to where they're good to go. I understand if there's extenuating circumstances and they have to push back to a date certain. But the problem is that the last meeting, it was moved back to date certain August 8th. Now it's moved back to date certain August 22nd. On August 22nd, it could be moved back to date certain October blah, 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 and back to date December blah, blah, blah. The time that this group takes to review these things is very valuable. And there are a ton of things that the board is trying to juggle as far as other applications, code that needs to be fixed, all of those things. And I'm sure I speak for other members of this board, and this is not on you, Don, I guess this is to you folks as applicants. I do not come to this group until your ducks are in a row. Because there are plenty of things that could be done at these meetings that will do a great deal of service to this community. And by clogging up our agenda with items that keep getting moved back further and further, you are impeding this group from doing its work. That is what is most upsetting to me about this. And then the fact that by pushing this back more and more, it is only creating a larger problem for the applications that are going to come up later in the year. So how do we deal with this? Because I mean, I see this being a problem where if we keep having applicants say, well, we're not quite ready, we're gonna move it back. Who's to say that one evening all of a sudden 6 of them are ready to go, and then we're up to our eyeballs in applications, and then none of them, they don't get processed in time, and then they're suing the city. There's something wrong with this process. So I don't know. That's just my thoughts. Commissioner Ewert, you have been very vocal. I just want to double check with some of the other folks here before, and I just want to make sure, I want to check in.
Too.
I want to check in with Don to see, am I allowed to talk about this right now?
I mean, I think that's fine. I
Okay.
think the decision before you is one that you have to make. We do not have the authority to deny a continuance. It's great.
Oh,
you
no, I
vocalize
understand
that, but I'm just letting you know as part of the record. Now,
Yeah.
and just before, because I know you guys all have opinions on this.
Yes.
I think on staff's end, what.
Do we need to continuance this and then have this discussion?
Well, I mean,
or-
I would say that would be probably the best order, but I just throwing out that things do happen in the land use process.
Yeah.
Not every applicant has 100% designed out their project. Everybody's in a hurry. It's not an excuse.
So
but
that's,
this is,
but yes,
that's it. I
Just
mean,
hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Not all applicants have their stuff designed out 100%. We're supposed to be reviewing the application with 100%. How are they allowed to insert themselves in the system? That's like me saying, oh, I want to I want to buy this piece of property, but I don't quite have the money yet, so don't tell anybody else they can buy it until I'm ready to go. No, that's not how that works. So, I don't know. But anyways, I'm sorry.
I would say that this, thematically, this is not happening super frequently. I know this is the third one for this applicant, but overall globally,
yes,
we're not having this, but to your point, I think what staff can do better is being a little more critical on the fully complete. And, there is a lot of pressure that we receive to get things moving.
Oh, sure.
And part of that is just making the applicants aware until you have all the pieces of information in and have decided, because what happens sometimes is there's these delays, and it's not usually on staff's end. It's like, what do you want to do? You have choice. The situation, they're saying, well, I think we're going to do a variance. Well, like we have a hearing scheduled. I think what we should be saying is, no, the line in the sand is, we're not doing anything until that decision's made. And then they go back and forth and their design team. And like we say, no, it's too late. We don't want to send something to the planning commission. And apparently some of these applicants are not as eager to resolve things quickly. That's all I can say on that. But I think the only thing we can do as the staff is be a little tighter on the gatekeeping before you ever see it the first time around.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
and I think to that point, even if it comes down to where, if the city staff is worried about repercussions of, these applicants, I mean, if they want to say, well, I don't want to we can't put this on the agenda yet because you're not ready to go. And if the applicants like boohoo why say it's, well, because I don't want to get my butt chewed by the planning commission. I mean, if you need to use us as the hammer on these people's heads, say,
Yeah, send them up here. We'll talk to them.
You've got a problem, take it up with the planning commission. And there's
We'll talk
a
to 'em.
couple of different places in our meeting where they can come in here and they can boo-hoo to us about
Yep.
how they don't have their thing 100% and we aren't seeing it. And it's be like, okay, well, why isn't that 100%? That to me, that is just that. So,
The other thing I was going to mention, I'm sorry, before you go further, is that this is not going to affect the other applicants that are in process. So the queue that you're talking, I mean, that's the worst case scenario is everybody gets bumped. It's a domino thing. It's not happening in this situation. So.
okay. So I know you're ready to go, but we're going to let Commissioner Jarosh speak first.
So a couple things, managed projects for like 30 years, and when a person waits till the project due date and says, oh, never mind, I have another due date, and then they get the next due date and they wait till that due date, that's a bigger problem. It's a different kind of problem. That's bad behavior for one thing. And that leaves us unable to plan a plan B, right? We could have spent more time on another section of code, which I know the city council wants us to do, but we can't do that because we always find out at the last minute that they're not ready. And why is that? Why is that happening?
It's training applicants, to be honest with you. That's the honest answer I can give you.
Okay.
This community has not trained applicants. I'm just going to be completely honest.
Yeah.
The bar was rather low.
Okay,
And
that's
I'm
fair.
just going to be honest with you. I mean, that's the honest truth.
Sorry?
The bar is being raised, and it has been, and it's continued to be raised. For some reason, people think, Canby, how hard can it be? I mean, they do. I'm just throwing it out there, but that's that's kind of the attitude a little bit. And it's like, well, it can be pretty darn hard. You
Then I
may
have
be
a
denied.
Procedural follow-up question.
it's
Since
like-
they have more time now, I found an error, and I won't discuss the specific error, but I found an error in the transportation report. And it's not, just, it's enough, I think, well, it will be brought up, but can we ask them, since they have time, to fix it instead of bringing us a problem?
No,
we do that?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
I'll
if
send it
they're-
to you.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
send that to me.
I will.
Glad to address that. To the extent we can, and we strive for this, and some applicants have been waiting a long time, and some of that is because, we want to make sure it's fully available. You guys have all the answers to the extent that we believe they're there. I would categorize this as more anomalous, although I know you guys feel like this should never happen. But that would be how I would characterize this.
Okay. Anything else, Commissioner Jarosh? Commissioner Ellison? No. No, okay. Commissioner Hutchinson?
No.
No, okay. Commissioner Calkins? I'm saving the best for last.
I was just-
Commissioner, Ewert.
I was just going to quickly add that I think that when you talk about that 100% design, it really fits perfectly in with what we've been talking about, the fences. It's like, oh, we got it 80%, okay, approved. And then it's like, how did these fences get here? It's that whole same kind of idea. And also, when you're in the same industry, you talk to each other. So if traditionally we've had a low bar, it's like, oh, go to Canby, they'll approve anything. You don't have to even turn anything in on time. So this is where we're at, dump your toxic cement into the ground, build your fences high as close to the street as you want. They don't even look, so I appreciate trying. Well, there's new sheriffs in town.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to get the word out. So if you have a problem with Don, come here, we'll talk to you. It's all good. That's all I have.
In a non-threatening manner.
Yep.
We are an inclusive thing. Okay. Commissioner Ewert. Now I will just forewarn you, you are being recorded.
Not a problem. I agree with Commissioner Calkins very, very much. I think this is a management issue. And I personally think that there's several things that need to happen. Number one, if there's a continuance, I think that we are the ones that need to say, we need a continuance. Number two, I think that if as soon as they say, wait a minute, we're not ready, I think if they want to get back on the schedule, and they've already been on the schedule, want to get back on the schedule, they sign off on the 120-day rule. And I think there should be a fee levied. I just think that there needs to be a consequence to what's going on. And I think that they moved the back of the pack. I'm looking at our schedule here that Laney set out to us. On the 22nd and the 8th, we're talking about the HLC. On the 22nd, we're doing the 4th Avenue Fiveplex. Then we jump to the 12th. The 28th is, I think, our next meeting, but it's not on here. Is that correct? But we go to the 12th, and we have another big project. The 26th, we have another large project. Both of those are in September. The 10th, the first meeting in October, is another big project. If you're on the schedule and you don't want to be, you don't just conveniently get put back into the schedule. Looks to me like the first open date for anybody to be on the schedule would be 10/24. Now, I realize that's going to crimp their style, but we need to have some parameters with these people. And it is, you just see it with attorneys and big companies and everything else. Like it was stated earlier, come to Canby, it's not going to be a problem. Well, I think that what we just need to do is, this is how we're going to play football, and these are the rules, and that's just the way it's going to be. And if it's important enough for you to say you're going to be here and then pull back, it better be. Now, if it's the city's problem, then that needs to be addressed. But as far as I'm concerned, we're not hearing them tonight. You're saying the 28th?
I'm saying the 22nd of August, and actually what Laney sent out, I have a revision to that, so it's not as challenging as was identified. And I'm happy to go through that now or at the end.
We can go toward.
Yeah.
Towards the
So I just think, sign off on the 120 dual rule, go to the back of the pack, pay a fee, or any combination thereof. There needs to be some accountability as far as I'm concerned.
A historical note, the last time this happened, I believe it was Valentine's Day, and there were some mad council members.
Yeah.
Well, and
We're still working through that at home.
so, and I guess for me, this, to me, and I might be wrong, this isn't the first time this has happened. There's been a history of applicants coming to this board, to this group, not having their ducks in a row, and then we start to ask the hard questions, and all of a sudden it's like, now we're appealing it to the city council. To me, this is happening as if it is mimicking what would have happened if they had just showed up, said, oh, it'll all work itself out, and then they have to go to city council. And we've had several of those come up. And the thing that's really concerning me is that we have yet to go through one of these applications with the new format, where it's all on. Like, these people need to bring their dog and pony show and maybe a couple of elephants and be ready to go. They've never done that before. And so, I feel kind of bad for these thermoglass people, because if they're the first ones, man, they are going to be, we're all going to be guinea pigs together. It could be rough. But I guess my question is, for it's been mentioned about the 180-day rule, or 120, the 100 plus days. Does it start from the time that we take up the application, or from the time we vote to approve or disapprove the application?
We have the beginning of that process is a fully complete process where we go through before that clock, really even starts. So there's a 30-day window for us to determine if it's fully complete or not, based on what they've submitted. And then from there, the clock starts, and then from there, we have them on hold again So it's,
So is the clock ticking or is the clock paused? Like some of the time has been eaten up, or is the time being eaten
there
up?
has been some time eaten up on this. And if we get to that point of the 120 day, we've always asked for that. We've always received an extension for
Okay.
that. Which if they can force a decision to be made for denial.
Okay.
Yeah.
My next question is, can we drive the bus on this? So if they say, we're not quite ready, we need a continuance, can the city be the one to say, okay, we're not gonna just keep we're not gonna bump you back to the next meeting, we're gonna bump you back for X period of time, to give you ample time to get your ducks in a row. And then if you get your ducks in a row before we get to that date, let's say it's 2 months out. If you get your ducks in a row before that date, we will put you as a contingent item, a contingent hearing on an upcoming agenda. And, here you would have the possibility of being heard at that point in time. Is there a way to do that sort of thing?
I think we have to be first cognizant of the 120 day. I mean, where are we at in that process? I think if we have stacked, we have not reached that point quite yet where we have stacked applications back to back to back. So you're shuffling every time that happens. We're getting closer to that point. But I mean, we could do a situation where somebody, if they're, that they are second on that item, on the hearing item, as long as we're still within the 120 days.
The problem that I see, looking at our schedule, I'm seeing 3, possibly 4 things that might take more than 1 meeting. They may take 2 or 3 meetings. And that's what that scenario runs into a problem.
Yeah.
Because they show up with all their people and we say, okay, well, we're gonna continue this till the next meeting.
And then,
Okay, now, what do we do? And so that's the problem I see with that. Because this schedule that we're looking at in front, I mean, heck, it could conceivably very easily be shoved all the way into December. Just because of the magnitude of the things we're hearing.
Yep. So, Commissioner Calkins?
Yeah, I guess a question for you, Don, maybe it's, I am interested in sort of a penalty detracting kind of thing scenario like Commissioner Ewer was laying out. Is that something that the city administrator can just do? Is that something that the council has to vote on? I would make a motion right now to send it to council as a recommendation from us that they look at this if it is in their purview. But so I'm just kind of understanding like how that would work.
I think it's, staff makes the agenda. We can set the agendas. I mean, essentially that's our, we try to do that equitably. And I think to your point of, somebody is fortunately in this situation, we don't see that happening. In fact, August 22nd, that would be the only hearing item. We would likely bring parklets, the work session before you as well that same night. Those are the only 2 on that date. And then just moving forward, back maybe since we're kind of dancing around this, Amazon would be September 12th. Canby Center and 4th Avenue Fiveplex would be the 26th of September. These are a little bit not 100% on these being set, but those are what we have up and coming. Baker Center has been postponed. That is being recast as something else.
Oh my gosh, the mold has been broken.
I know, but
Okay.
so back to my question.
Okay.
So if we wanted to try to make a recommendation of trying to put some pain in there if they're doing this kind of thing in the future, because it's clearly very frustrating, right? How would that work?
Well, I think first of all, I mean, in order to avoid the pain, we will be very specific about, the lens here could be, you guys are not 100% there, and, we can make it difficult to get to hearing without that situation happening. I think part of it is we're trying not to let this thing completely get out of control. Some applicants are able to kind of pull it together, but, I think that's part of that situation. Part of it is, as everything else, there's some uniqueness to the defense of thermoglass. I don't want this to be a one-sided situation. They have
No.
a unique configuration, unique geometry of the roadway, unique dedication, which they did not presume, which requires a more unique design on their site. So, and I think to the extent that we as staff, not just globally, not just talking about planning, but globally perhaps didn't articulate that quite as specifically at pre-app, going back to the, beginning of time on this thing, that was part of the element here.
Okay.
I don't know, I mean, could this have been resolved at last without having to do it again? That, I can't answer that. That's on the applicant. But to the extent what we can control on our end is being very thorough at the pre-app, which we do a really good job, I believe, but being even more specific about answering those questions up front on design, and then holding people to the fire on this thing, saying, no, you can't go past go, get to the PC until you've got absolutely everything ready to go.
Okay. And before we go to this, I just want to let folks know, Thermoglass, if you listen to this is not going to have an impact on our discussion tonight. Will have no impact on the review of your application. This is you just happen to be one of the wheels that have come across this speed bump, and that is why we're having this conversation. So I want to make that very clear to everybody at Canby and anybody else listening to this, that we will make sure that will not cloud our judgment in our deliberations when this does come across the dais. So that being said, Commissioner Ellison and then Commissioner Jarosh.
So just kind of dovetailing on what Commissioner Calkins was talking about, and that's what I'm trying to really get to the core of, is what is within our purview when it comes to continuance? What can we decide as a body, or because I heard you say the first thing that, you were going to tighten the strings up on the application process, but then carrying on, let's say we do run into this again in the next couple of meetings. What can we do as a body, and what has to be executed by city council when it comes to changing the process and the language?
And I think the main thing is a tightening on everything before it gets to you, is because technically you have no authority to deny a continuance.
Right.
Zero authority.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be honest. But to that extent of before it gets to you, so we don't end up having a continuance and then another continuance. The only silver lining is, let's say a person comes to the planning commission and, let's say it goes horribly wrong and there's a denial, and then it goes to council and then they remand it back to you. Is that better than a continuance? I'm just asking you a hypothetical question.
Well, I think we go right back to the previous discussion we had, which was, what was the point of if they can just go there and come right back to here.
Well, and I think that, so arguably, I'm not saying that, I'm trying to compare and contrast those two, but I would say that what we can do better on the staff's end is the filter process on our end. We'll own that. Stuff does happen occasionally and people want a continuance, and legitimately that makes a better product for you to see it when it comes back.
Can the continuance have conditions to it, or is continuance just, it's yes or no?
To a date certain, yeah. That's it.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Commissioner Jarosh?
So my question is, since they had 2 last-minute changes, it sounds like there may be a lack of transparency about how far along they are in the process of being ready. Do we have any more assurances about how far along they are? Have they said anything? They're 50% there, they're 20% there?
They've basically said they'll have all the information to us this week. That's really the deadline. We've drawn it out that specifically, and then from there, we're talking about renoticing this thing instead of a continuance, yeah.
Okay, so they have to have it to you within a week?
Yeah,
Okay.
by the end of this week.
The end of
yeah,
this
yeah.
week, okay.
I think it's by Thursday, actually.
Okay, thank you, Don.
Sure.
Okay, and then just to jog my memory, what is our timeframe for amending our agenda and still being able to do stuff?
With a continuance, we can just do that, and you have that's under your purview, and without having to add, but otherwise, you've got to fully notice something. If it's a brand-new item, this has been noticed originally, then it gets, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as like, let's say the applicant says, oh, we're gonna need a continuance, and you say, okay, we're gonna talk about, whether or not we can do glass doors on buildings, in the code. When could you, is it 7 days that you can add a new item to the agenda? What is that time frame?
I think typically we don't want surprises at the end. We'd like to give, so that 10 days in advance like we would normally for a staff report on these. Once they're in process, though, there may be less time. I don't believe the code specifies.
So
the
we could
exact
technically
timeline.
make a change to our agenda the day before the meeting, or no?
No, I mean, the question is, does it need to be noticed? I mean, are you bringing forward an item that you continued previously?
No. This
Yeah.
is like what is the deadline for us making changes to our agenda and still being able to talk about something at this meeting?
And I would say that would at least be the 10-day period. If, it's
10 days.
possible that, like, depending on the circumstances, it may be a complete renotice process as well, so.
Okay. Well, I know that there are some rules as far as the city council has these sort of things where they have to, like, they can't put a new item on the agenda. That has to be all hashed out in advance.
So you couldn't, for example, today, the cancellation, we couldn't pivot on our own and just decide we're gonna talk about fences?
No.
That's a no-go.
That is a
You would
no,
have to advertise that in advance, yeah.
Roger that, thank you.
and that's the 10 days. Uh-oh, is there a problem?
Commissioner Patton,
Yeah.
what if we made certain code items a alternate that may be discussed in lieu of a cancellation?
I have
Published 10 days in advance, yes?
I have proposed that several times, just to I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I might have dreamed it, but I think there has been several meetings where I have said, in preparation for things like this, we should put stuff, we should just put some stuff on the agenda that's sort of waiting in the wings, so that if time allows, we can then discuss those things. I really am a proponent of that.
So if you're saying, like, if we didn't find out that tonight's was gonna happen until yesterday, say,
Yep.
and so if there's no change could be done, but fences were already on it, then we could talk about fences, but if it happened, if they did show up, we could just say, oh, we'll get to fences next time, or do we have to talk about fences also?
Well, and is there
No.
a staff member who's spearheading the fence thing, who's gonna be the person who's strung along and show
Oh,
up to a
that's a
bunch of
good point.
meetings
I
that they
didn't think
don't
of
need
that.
to?
That's a good point.
I think the real item here is there are times where you are not given much notice on the change, but circumstantially, we have to follow the code on our noticing procedure for an item to reach the, I mean, on a work session thing, it's a little different, but on a hearing item, because they have different regulatory rules on those on work sessions. But on a hearing item that needs public notice, that is the critical factor for us, on that. And that could end up being a continuance on that. It could be there are things that happen. We do make changes to agendas. Sometimes they're rather near to the hearing. But the question is, did it get properly noticed to begin with?
Okay. Commissioner Ewert, did you have anything? I know you have a lot of stuff, but I just want to make sure I don't skip over you. Make sure your microphone's on.
I think that we're way overthinking this, in my opinion. I think that staff needs to make sure that our 120-day rule is in our favor. So if we've chewed up some of it, we're not gonna chew up any more of it that staff may need to do it. We absolutely have to, because we've got things coming up here that I expect to see every seat in the place full. And if we get a last minute cancellation, that's just poor business. That's just really, really poor business. And then we expect people to show up and we expect people to be in the process. Okay? No. And so I think there needs to be, I really, truly, the city council's all in, and these are using your words of capturing fiscal
Cost recovery.
responsibility,
Yep.
okay? I think that there needs to be some type of a framework as to what, if you say, I'm not ready, and you were on there needs to be something, there needs to be a cost associated with that.
And I think in this circumstance, the applicant, they weren't bumping anyone else by essentially, because there was discussion internally about exactly what you're saying, that they could lose a month as long as they're still within the 120 day.
So, I mean, I'm looking at our schedule, and, if the one on the 22nd is postponed, so be it, because I think that the next meeting, we're gonna be hearing the one that was before them. We'll probably be hearing it again on that date. It's just a time management thing. And so I think a fee, some kind of a fee structure is should be put in place. The 120-day rule needs to be talked about. And then if there's an open slot that gives enough time for public notification, for staff to put the package together, or they, feel confident to bring it to us, that they could be filled in. And so I just think we just need to have a structure. We just need to do something that Canby's never done before, and actually put a structure in to say, if you want to come to Canby and be a neighbor with us, we're more than happy to hear it. We're more than happy to look at it. But if you start doing the, two-step, then it's going to cost you something. Now, I would imagine that there's other cities that have some type of structure in place that says, if you start pulling this stuff, but Canby, we're not the cheap card anymore. We have value. Coming to Canby is a value. And when we do this kind of stuff, we're devaluing ourselves and we're devaluing our citizenry by expecting them to be involved. It's my personal feelings.
So on that train of thought, is there kind of what I'm hearing and distilling this down a bit, if an applicant, more like a 3 strikes sort of thing, if you have, granted, we understand that there's going to be extenuating circumstances, and if it's something where the city missed something, that's one thing. But if an application gets noticed, and they have like 1 or 2 more strikes, and then if for some reason, because they are unprepared, they need a 3rd continuance or something along those lines, that there's a penalty fee for that. Does that sound crazy?
We have, to the comment Commissioner Ewert made, we did add that to our fee structure.
Okay.
To do a re-notification cost, there's a fee associated with that. Continuances are not in that same category. So I think the big issue here is just making sure that they're absolutely ready to go before they ever come to you. And I was, on that note, could I ask for a quick break here? This bottle of water is like suddenly speaking to me.
Oh, yes. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a 10-minute or 5-minute recess.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Canby, to our riveting meeting here. It's actually turned out to be more exciting than I thought it was going to be, so that's kind of nice. So we'll go ahead and pick up where we left off, which I think, have we beaten this horse as about
I
as
think
speed
we
as it
can, I think we have, I think the takeaways on this are, for us, to the broad conversation. We absolutely, will be looking to make sure that things are fully baked, so to speak, before they get to the planning commission. I think that's probably the biggest thing we could do.
Okay.
And just, I think that's it. Now, again, I know that this is a little bit weird, having something continue 3 times, but again, it gives the applicant the ability within that 120 days to get it right, basically, and to meet the clear and objective standards of the city, which are the requirements of the city, and that's what we're required to enforce.
Okay.
So just wanted to point that out, okay?
Perfect. So now I think I'll get us back on track, even though I'm the one that took us off.
The item would be the continuance for
Correct.
thermoglass to date certain August 22nd.
Yes, so the matter presently before the hearing body, DR 22-06 Thermoglass Warehouse, requires a public hearing, and all interested persons in attendance would be heard on this matter. At this point in time, the applicant has requested continuance to date certain August 22nd, 2022. Do we do any discussion on that, or it's just it? And then I close the public hearing.
I would just, motion and decision on that. I think you can close, yeah, I don't think.
Do we need to, I mean, if it is what it is, do we have to vote to do it?
I would say, I would like that on the record, that
We
you're
would like that,
continuing
okay.
after this.
So
like-
I'll
Yeah.
entertain a motion for the continuance.
Motion.
Is there a second?
I move.
I move to motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Come on, Mr. Ewert.
Second.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Oh my gosh, there's so much motion. I was doing a whole lot of motion when that hornet was stinging me in the face this morning. Woo! So anyways, so it's been moved by Commissioner Ellison and seconded by Commissioner Calkins to approve the continuance for DR 22-06 Thermoglass Warehouse to the meeting on August 22nd, 2022. Is there any other discussion? Commissioner Ewert.
My calendar shows that August 22nd, we have another item on the agenda. Does staff feel that we can hear both of those in one night? And if we cannot,
That, again, back to what you received from Laney, that has been amended.
Yeah.
And the only other item would be the parklet discussion, which is not 100% sure that's going to go on the 22nd.
The other thing's going.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. I showed the 22nd as a fiveplex.
That has been moved.
That has been changed. So what you received this morning
Is out of date.
no longer,
I thought Baker Center had been postponed.
it has. So I'm recasting this if you'd like me to go through that again on
Okay.
the dates.
Okay,
We'll cover it in your.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, we're almost there. Woo-hoo. All those in favor of the continuance signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there is there any opposition? Is there any abstentions? The continuance approves unanimously. Okay, so that is the end of our public hearings for this evening. Now, and the public, you have heard a lot. We have talked about a lot of stuff. So anyways, moving on to the agenda, we're now going to go on to item number 6, which is items of interest and reports from the planning staff.
Sure.
And for that, I will turn it over to the planning director, Don.
Chair Patton, just a few items, and again, maybe just to repeat so that it's clear. So we got Thermoglass on August 22nd. Amazon is anticipated on September 12th. That one is moving forward. Canby Center and 4th Avenue Fiveplex should be on September 26th. The Fourth Avenue Fiveplex is still not 100%, but Canby Center should be. That's what we have at this point, and there's a possibility on the 22nd of August also to be discussing the parklet. That's an item that the council is driving for parklets, both on public roads as well as within private parking lots. And so they've asked us to put that together, much like the food cart ordinance, but this would be for parklets. So we would be going first to you with a work session on that, and then followed by city council work session, and with the end result that we're trying to get this entirely completed before May 1st, 2023.
May
1st, 2023.
The parklet thing.
Yes.
Okay, so real quick, so 8/22, we're doing thermoglass and a work session on parklets, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but it sounded like maybe not parklets.
Maybe, well, I believe we will have that, but I'm working with staff on,
Because my concern is if that parklets are on 9/22, if we have Canby Center, possibly Fiveplex and parklets, that seems like a lot.
yes, I would agree. And so I would say that it will be on 8/22, the parklets. So,
Okay. Is that going to, is any of the members of staff going to come to my house and burn it down if we push for that?
No.
Okay,
No, it actually needs to be pushed because I am concerned that there's a lot to be done. It seems like a long ways out, but it's
And-
going to go quickly, and we want to beat the timeline.
yeah, and has the city council provided us with much directive on this, or other than they want parklets?
They've had work sessions, and so there are boundaries around what they've discussed, and we'll provide that background to you about what that is. And your opinion, your recommendation to them will be important in that decision.
So if that's the case, so like we want to talk about fences. And so we've talked about fences, and now we send that off to the city council, and they're going to talk about fences on their own, and then they're going to come back to us. Wouldn't it make sense, like with this whole parklet thing, I know they're hot to trot on this, why would we not be included in the initial discussion about the parklets so that we're all on the same page and we can, move this along?
And we could
Does that seem odd?
we could look at a joint session. Would you prefer that?
What do I mean, am I the only one that's thinking this?
Okay.
I've got some indifference, I got some thumbs up, I
What
don't
would be
know.
the value of doing it independently? I agree. Yeah.
If they've got strong opinions about parklets, I have almost zero opinions about them. So I'd like to hear what they have to say first, honestly.
So, but they've already had their work sessions on this, haven't they?
They initiated it because that was something that was expiring. And
Yes,
so that was the initiation of it. And so we've had several discussions with them already about the boundaries, the parameters of what this would be. They've said, go forth and prepare the draft ordinance. And so you're obviously part of that legislative process. If I can run that by our administrative folks and say, should we go ahead and do a joint session?
but they haven't had any other directive other than to say, we want parklets, we want them now.
Well,
That's like
there's
the-
there's more than that.
They've had more discussion.
There is quite a bit more about the boundaries of the details of that. Yes, there's,
That they have talked
that
about
they have talked about.
already.
Yes.
Okay, so,
Correct me if I'm wrong, the program was going to expire.
Yes.
Yes.
And they were going to let it expire, and then some citizens came and said,
Correct.
don't let it expire.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there was a big discussion about that, and they decided to not let it expire, correct? So it's extended again, right? And-
Yep.
But they want a permanent solution rather than this temporary program. And so now it's to us to kind of think about what that might be. And then so I don't
I
know
was
if
here for
like.
that meeting. I
Oh, you were there.
I was in the council chamber for the meeting. I know exactly what was going on. My
Okay.
question is,
Well-
if they want this to move real quickly, and they have strong opinions on it, and we need to be the ones to then drag this to the goal line, why weren't we included in that initial process?
Yeah, I mean, I think really this was a council directive thing. When you go back further, we're talking about COVID times and like this kind of predates you guys.
Yeah, I know.
The origin of this predates any discussion or thought process of a normal legislative process.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to nail the fact that moving forward, because this body is much more involved in the process and has an interest in moving these things forward, I think that when the city council comes up with these ideas, and if they have opinions on it, we need to be included in work sessions with them to get that information firsthand, not secondhand, so that we can help shave some of the time off of this process. Because otherwise, they're having a discussion, they're giving that information to you, you're then trying to regurgitate that information to us. We come up with something, we then send it to the city council, and they say, well, this has nothing to do with what we were talking about. Whereas if we were to just have that work session together in the beginning and start to get all on the same page, it would help speed that process up. Does that make sense to other people, or am I crazy? Has the venom of the wasps kicked in?
I'm just more concerned about, they're going to put forward this item for us to review from a planning code perspective, correct? And there's nothing currently in the code, so we're going to be adopting code?
Well, actually, there's a template that we have already in existence for temporary situations that address those, not for parklets, but we do have
Temporary vendor permits and stuff.
temporary vendor permits, which gives a very solid, it's in our code, gives a very solid boundaries of what is currently in play. That, I think, is a really good model to start from. Council has gone beyond that, and so there's additional detail that they've actually added to that, which I think would be part of the discussion here. These are not the same discussions, whether if it's in a private parking lot, we're talking about parking standards and numbers versus if you're on a public street. Those issues are less, especially downtown where there's no parking requirements. It's a different discussion. It's more about equity and businesses than it is other things.
Are we gonna have to revise our parking standards to
Not,
accommodate this?
not for downtown, and the parking, legitimately in the program, the parking could be done in a way that's, it's a new ordinance for these specific entities that address parking as part of that. The parking code doesn't really need to be revised, it could be done as part of this. Downtown requires no parking to begin with. For areas within shopping centers, there's have to be a standard created for that, which is looking at the adequacy of the parking. Is it adequate, and what is the standard for that?
Oh, Don, that's so deep. If we get down that rabbit hole, I just tell you right now, my spine is tingling with both anticipation and dread about this downtown parking thing.
So just
Oh, that's some high hanging fruit that I would love to rip right out
So-
that tree.
maybe it's a suggestion. Could we meet with you to give you an orientation on 822 and then set up a PCCC joint work session? And as a next step, would that be appropriate?
What do people think? I like that idea.
Okay.
And I guess, so just, so I think the train of thought is, so like the food carts, so we have a temporary vendor permit process. It is a process that allows people to set up a temporary stall within the city limits. The food cart thing piggybacks on that temporary vendor permit, because someone with a food cart has to get a temporary vendor permit.
Well,
This,
can I stop you there?
Oh, God. Have I overspoke?
Because food carts, that's a brand new ordinance that we are not requiring. For the pods, that's a completely different entity now in terms of that
they
process.
don't need a temporary vendor permit.
No.
No, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, so
Pretend I didn't
that
say it.
was kind of the original origin, 6-month provision.
Okay.
Nobody took advantage of it. No one wants to do an outdoor espresso shop, build up a client base, and in 6 months close their doors. Thus the idea behind the food carts.
Yeah.
It's just an example, but
Correct. But the parklet is more close.
Parklet is like more, it's more like downtown is really the focal point of like where that could be and elements around that. And there's actually quite a bit to start from. So it's not like we're starting from scratch.
Sure. Okay, very good. So does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Commissioner Ewert, you look like you're deep in thought. Or are you just done? I'm sorry. So, yeah, I think that would be good is if we, yeah.
So can I move on to
Yeah, go
something
ahead.
else?
Sorry, I've
No, it's all good. This is why this is important to hear what you guys have to say. The other items that we're continuing to push forward, these are separate. These are not, they're going to come back to you at some point, but the housing opportunity analysis and economic opportunity analysis work is continuing. Surveyors are out there. We're going to blast those out further to get more input. We want the public's input on those. Very important in the process. So those are going to be continued to be available for the public to provide input on. There'll be another set of work sessions or advisory sessions rather for both housing and economic, and there'll be another open house after that. A small segue is that our comprehensive plan and transportation system plan request for proposal will also be released very soon, and that will serve our comp plan and transportation system plan updates in the city. We need to hire a consultant, and the goal here, it takes a long time to do that in the sense of advertising that and interviewing, and given that we have a charter that requires us to go through the full process for budgetary approvals, my goal would be hopefully to start this and get a consultant team on board before the end of the year. That's the goal. That's moving forward. Fencing, coming back to you. I know we talked about that. Did talk to Ryan. I don't have a date certain for that. We will want council to weigh in, kind of the opposite of the parklet thing where you guys didn't have a lot of information. They don't have a lot of information like we're even talking about fences. So
if that's the case, should it be another work session?
well, we could do, if you want to do another joint session with them. That problem is they're an hour. So like, yeah, well, they need to be separated.
What do you mean they're an hour?
Well, usually they're a little over an hour with the joint work sessions.
So my question is, can we see I would like to see if for the fences, that they can come to us for a work session.
And join.
Because we have plenty, we have plenty of work sessions that get shoved into the city, the city council's agenda, and then it gets squeezed because of the other three things that they're trying to do. Whereas I would like to see for fences if they can join us on one of our meetings as a work session.
I think there's some definite merit to that. I need to go through our channels here to.
No, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, but that would give more time because I feel like every time these are a little bit rushed, to be honest with you.
Because the fences, this is a meaty topic, and I don't want.
So the same thing with parklets. Would that be your request or not?
Parklets. I don't know. What are people's thoughts on the parklets? I mean, that's sort of a thing coming from them to us. We can come to them.
Yeah. Okay.
This is something coming from us to them. They should come to us.
I don't even know what they're talking about.
The parklets?
What is a parklet?
What is,
Gosh,
thank you.
we're not even going to.
I am still trying to figure it out.
No. We're not going to get into that right now.
Oh, yeah.
Watch the meeting. Watch the city council meeting from that night. You'll know all about parklets.
Noted.
Yeah, it was good.
I
A
have
lot
no
of
idea.
citizens.
No, don't
There were
say
a lot
that.
of citizens, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it was a packed meeting. I was here for there was some other planning commission thing that was going to be talked about, and that's why I showed up to that meeting. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's people like standing out in the vestibule. I don't even know what is going. Who
Well,
said
that was because the expiration thing, and
Yes.
so that's the push, and
Correct.
So that's where that started.
Exactly. No, I was here for that whole thing. So okay, very good. I think if they would be willing to come to us for the fence one, I think that would be great.
And then just the last item, you had mentioned, Chair Padden, it sounds like their planning commission interest for the seat that is vacant. perhaps, or I'm not sure if there is.
Is there?
Well,
No, I don't hear
I was
anybody.
hearing that optimism earlier, but I'm
No,
not sure.
that's
They are,
false
but they're
optimism.
outside the growth boundary.
Ouch! Oh my gosh! Wow, what a zinger over there.
But
So, no, I was sarcastically
Okay.
optimistic about what I was
I
saying.
thought you knew something that you
No,
weren't sharing.
my
Yeah.
suspicion
Okay.
is that my suspicion and maybe my
Okay.
dreaded hope is
Yeah.
that when if this entire area is filled up with people freaking out about Amazon, that someone will be like, I need to become part of the planning commission, and then they'll
I'll
apply.
fill that seat. I mean, if you guys have influence at all.
I got
mean,
nobody.
Okay.
I can't even get people to join the Lions Club, let alone things like this.
Yeah.
We only meet 5 times a year, Don, so.
And the budget committee is high.
And the budget committee, I think we have a full budget. I think we do for now.
Watching this meeting would give them pause.
What, with
Or
me?
I said if they watch this meeting, they might go, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
They really know how to beat a dead horse metaphorically
We
in this
do.
meeting.
So if you like beating dead horses, you got an axe to grind. We got a grindstone.
Okay, but I just wanted to throw that, because it kind of like vaporized a little bit in terms of the traction of that process.
There's no traction. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I have not heard of anybody
Okay.
interested
Okay.
in that position.
It is,
Yes.
yeah,
All the
yeah.
commissions, summer is like, out of sight, yeah.
So that was it. That was all I have. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
I should be mowing my lawn and planting tiny Douglas fir seedlings right now for work, so.
that was all I had. Yeah.
Okay. Anything, any questions about what we talked about with Don? Okay. So, do you have something?
I have a question for staff.
Yeah, go ahead.
You want there?
Yes, now we're on to items of interest and guidance from the planning commission.
Okay, the fence that was just put up on Territorial, talking about fences, that really beautiful, long cedar fence that stretches down there, does that meet our standards, our codes?
I am not sure which one that is, so I can't speak
It
to
would
it.
be right,
It's the one off, it's between the road to go to.
is it Holly? No.
Oh, it's between Ivy and,
Starts at the corner
Juniper.
of Lotus, goes.
Yeah, Locust. It's,
Yeah, anyway, I was
it's
just
that,
curious.
it's that housing
I'll ask,
development.
I will check with Ryan as another example. So where, Locust, what was the,
And
It's-
Territorial,
Okay.
it's right in that new subdivision
It's
there.
the subdivision that they came,
Okay.
they came and wanted to put a bunch of houses in there and the commission said no, and then they came back with something more,
okay.
something different.
Anyway, so that was my first question. The second question is, what's the status of the Walnut Street bypass? Where are we at? What are we doing?
Great question. There is a flyer coming out very, very soon. I've seen it. It looks good. I think there might be one additional piece of information provided on that, what should be construction estimates. But that is moving forward. Right-of-way's been secured. Final engineering design is occurring. There's more to the flyer than that, but that's what I remember. And that's like very close to being distributed, put on the city's website, because that's an important element that was not advertised as well as it probably should have been.
How close
And I
are we
think-
to moving dirt?
I think for moving dirt, it's
I-
next year.
I think that's correct. I think the design, final design, and I think that's correct. I think it was like 23. I think that was what I
Yeah.
was
It's
understanding.
early 2023.
And have we heard any more information on the roundabout on Art Road with Clackamas County, Barlow, 99 intersection, and so on and so forth?
There hasn't been a lot of additional updates. I need to follow back up with Clackamas County, with, I think, Steve Williams. They were working with Kittleson Associates. We've been involved in their committees on that. There's kind of a subcommittee that we are involved with. I can report back next time on that, but that's a good.
I'd just be curious.
It's a great question. I think part of it is that they have their conceptual design. I know they have their conceptual design for Bart I'm sorry, Barlow and 99. And then there aren't those two were conceptually identified in terms of the location, and the next step would be the county moving that forward into a more formalized program process. But that was where we left it, and I'm not sure if there's more to share on that.
So just curious on the Barlow 99 concept, what, is that like a gigantic roundabout, or is it a flyover?
It's I believe it's at grade, but it's separating the, it's doing it in a way that's allowing for that intersection to operate at a much better level of service, and primarily turning movements and separation from the railroad are the main elements of that. But it's like going from like level of service that's fairly poor to something that is fairly free flowing. It was the design concept, and it's really addressing that geometry, which is extremely poor there. Making that left turn into the city going northbound is really challenging.
I'd be curious to know what the big picture looks like there, because it's
And those design concepts have been completed. I believe Steve Williams was wanting to meet with our council and do a work session around that. It's a little bit delayed from where they were, I think, initially going with that, but I do need to follow back up with him.
I would like to go to that meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they have a work session there, I would love to go to that.
Absolutely, and public will be invited for that, but that will help significantly move that traffic through there much better than it is now, and that, everybody's trying to get to the freeway, and that's another source of that. You know.
The people that are designing that intersection, they're not the same ones that were putting the bridge over the Willamette and placing the ferry? It's not the same people?
Don't know. I don't know who those folks, this is Kittleson and Associates that's working with them, yeah.
Okay. Well, and I think part of the drive of looking at that is also as far as dealing with the traffic pattern changes with the tolling on 205.
I was under the impression the tolling issue was pretty much dead.
Oh my gosh, no.
Well, not according to,
No, the state's moving forward.
yeah, I can share a little bit on that as well.
I think they're just done talking about it.
That ODOT is moving forward with what they're calling mitigation strategies, addressing those elements. And ODOT is having meetings with city staff, us and others. They're planning to meet with us in August to talk about, this is the beginning of what we're going to see in their environmental assessment for tolling, and kind of what the existing baseline is for tolling. They have a baseline year. I'm not sure what they're using for that. And then they have a projected 2045 year. And when you do environmental studies, you have to look at baseline and existing conditions based on what that is now and compare it to what that would be. And, you know, is it functioning at baseline? Is it not functioning at baseline? There's a lot more to that discussion about, you know, what, and that's the part that I think people in Canby are most interested in is, you know, what will the mitigation be for along 99E? Part of that relates to, is that functional baseline date, you know, how bad will those intersections be? And because whatever baseline is, the mitigation, as I understand it, would probably be something that would address that if it made it worse. But if it was already not functioning well, I'm not sure what the mitigation is going to be.
So has that meeting been scheduled already?
It's an internal meeting, only with staff, and it's on the 19th of August. So that's something that is really just staff.
It's a staff meeting.
Yeah. Well, it would be us and Clackamas County
Sure.
and City of Aurora.
But like, we're not going.
City of
we are
Aurora.
not
You guys are not
showing up.
invited, like,
Yeah.
barely going to be enough people in capacity for, they're trying to trim down
Yeah.
the number of people on staff here in the city that are going to that, so.
Yeah.
So that meeting is, it's not 100% in concrete, but I believe that's going to be the date. So there's, the environmental assessment would be the next step. They're moving towards that. These things are very complicated when you get into environmental studies that are on this scale. Everybody wants things to be improved. There's only so much money.
Yeah.
They're defining the issue narrowly as to what gets improved and what doesn't. I'm hoping that we end up coming out with something that there's reasonable mitigation versus like, we're going to monitor it over time.
This is very reminiscent to when I was on council and the whole urban rural reserve came up, because like they started the process and then Canby like heard through the grapevine that they were drawing a hard line around the city, and then the city had to go and fight to be able to get some say in the matter. This is very similar to that. We can mitigate how hard the hammer hits us on our head, but regardless of what we do, it's going to hit us on the head.
They should make that a non-participating Zoom meeting.
I mean, there'll be other public meetings, but it's a fairly robust, I mean, they have a lot of different meetings at different times.
Yeah.
A lot of it's not focused on Canby centric.
No.
It's focused on equity and,
Yeah, because
and
it's going to be,
transit
it's
and
going to
things
hit
that are,
Aurora,
yeah,
Hubbard,
it's
Woodburn.
it's more on
Yeah.
the urban areas. And so I think really the bottom line is we have similar interests to, I mean, Clackamas County's similarly interested, obviously, even though they're not in the urban area here, they have concerns themselves. So their input has been important. They've been a good player and an advocate for good planning. So, I mean, their staff has been great to work with. Part of the challenge is it's just like, where's this all going to go? To your point, Chair Patton, I don't know where it's all going to go. We obviously are going to be writing, we're going to be involved in it, writing letters, et cetera. You know,
But we have the city ultimately, and this is just based on, because I attended the city council meeting where the ODOT person came and talked about this. And the feeling that I got from it was, we understand that you're upset, but this is going to happen. This is how it's going to be. We understand that there is a possibility that it could make things worse in the city of Canby, but we have no money to try and fend that off. We're just going to have to wait. We're going to have to wait for the fire to erupt before we can put it out, is kind of the read that I got from all
and
that.
one of the questions is the sources of funding. There's like a tiered situation. You're seeing the exact tier one you're seeing it on 205 now with the Abernathy Bridge, obviously funded. And there's some pieces that are already funded, some pieces that will be in that first tier of funding, and then some pieces in the second tier of funding. And so that is a huge question. And then the other really big question is, environmentally speaking, is the problem being defined in a way that like results in something tangible for relieving whatever portion of congestion that's being raised?
So if you want, well, whether you want it or not, I'm going to tell you my opinion. The read that I get from all of this is that the state needs money to fund the highway. They know that there's a pool of money that can be tapped into by tolling the highway. They're starting, this is just my opinion, okay, so I just make this well known. My opinion is the reason they're starting in Clackamas County is because there's less traffic through this area, and we have less say in the matter. If they really wanted to address the problem with the traffic, they would start where the traffic is the worst, which is up in Multnomah County. But instead, they're using the section of this interstate through Clackamas County as the guinea pig.
Well, I think part of that was the legislature defined the phasing of this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not defending them, but they set out the phases
Yeah, I mean, they're not idiots. They look at the map and they're like, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of people up here that will or will not vote for us. There's a bunch of people down here. Well, there's way less people down here. We're going to screw with these people first. That's what's happening.
And having separated 205 and 5 and not looking at the cumulative altogether makes this more challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, that's just my opinion.
So you guys ask, I'm sorry for the
No, you're
deep
fine.
dive, but you wanted to know. So that's absolutely something we're tracking.
I know we have no control over it.
Well, I mean, to the extent that we at least understand it is really, really critical.
Yeah.
we're not the only one in the same position that has a concern.
Because what we need to consider where it ties into us is with these traffic studies, because what'll end up happening is, you know, here we're bringing in Amazon, and then it's going to be like, well, you know, what does that look like now that the Amazon traffic is through here, and then in 7 years you add all these people coming through because they're trying to avoid the tolls. I mean, that's where it starts to impact the decisions of this group. And I don't think that that's been taken into consideration.
I think the transportation system plan as part of the comp plan update will be a critical piece to that, which is how does that get addressed? And the city will have a voice with that. You know, obviously ODOT, they own the road, the highway, they have a voice. But that was a question that I actually asked today for advice on that about, you know, where does this all go to our traffic folks?
Yeah. And I think, and I'll say this again, just because I want to make sure it's reiterated, for this traffic plan and the housing plan and all that stuff, the city needs to be sure that they are putting in triggers every at the 5, 10, and 15-year mark to have those things looked at and prepare for the next one. Because part of the reason that we are in this situation, and I know this has nothing to do with you and folks, but part of the reason we're in this situation is because these things were not updated when they should have been updated, and now we're behind the 8 ball. The city is behind the 8 ball. And only by baking into the system triggers to make sure that that is updated and funding is allocated in the budget annually to prepare for those costs is this going to be fixed, is my thought.
And you're correct. I mean, the capital, typically there's more of a 6-year plan and a 20-year plan. But to your point, there should be a framework around what's happening in the 6-year plan and what's happening beyond the 6-year plan.
Yeah.
And that's what the transportation system plan will look at.
Okay.
Anything else?
Anything else from the commission?
A real quick follow-up
Commissioner
question.
DeRoche.
So when we had the last steel mill application, and then they, took that back to the council, and the council remanded it back to us, we had a discussion about the language under the circumstances under which that could happen, and it came back to us saying we hadn't considered all the details. That went to Joe, came back to us, and we said, no.
Yep.
Who has it now?
That's been adopted by council, the language.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, our
The
request.
language,
Oh.
the language you requested, council accepted.
Okay.
Yeah, I think of that whole packet of stuff that we sent to council, the only thing, I thought I talked about this, but of all
sorry.
of that code stuff, no, I didn't talk about this specifically, but of all of that code stuff that we sent, that huge packet of things, the only thing that the council changed was we had put in a limitation that proponents and or opponents would have a maximum of 15 minutes worth of time to speak on an issue. And a majority of the council felt that that was too restrictive, that it's all right to say that you can limit, that there can be a maximum of 3 minutes for each person, and it could be 2, it could be 1, depending on how many people are in the chamber, but all of those people who want to talk about it need to be given the opportunity to talk. So they removed those maximum limits out.
Thank you.
Other than that, everything else that we sent to them was approved as we had written it. So kudos to this group for doing such a great job, and the city for prepping all of that. So, yes.
More to come, more code updates.
So excited. It's just fantastic. Like I said, at least once a quarter.
Yeah.
Code across the dais. I love it. Okay. Anything else? No? Oh my gosh. I think this was a very good meeting. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
It's moved.
Second.
And seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. It is unanimous. We are adjourned. Good night, Canby. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.